If you look at the traditional process of insight, design, and build, we often will talk about, we think we're really good with our, agile processes that are essentially combining design and build or insight and design, so there's some overlap to bring in some, to accelerate the process and bring in some efficiencies. But that's still not going to get you, that'll get you down to the order of months, but not down to weeks. To get to that level, we need a much more concurrent process, right? One that essentially combines or mashes up insight, design, and development. And this is something that at Frog we call concurrent design and development. And it's really thinking about prototyping not necessarily as a way to validate the design, but actually as a source of inspiration for the design in and of itself. Right? So we talk about pre-design, which is research, right? Ethnographic research that inspires. But there's post-design, which is actually the act of prototyping and playing with the materials, which is as important to getting your, to developing the prototype. And so if we could actually bring that process and integrate them so completely, then you have something quite compelling. But to do that, you actually need a new set of talent. Right? Right now, we tend to look at the world as you've got designers, you've got engineers, you've got strategists, you've got researchers, right? But that distinction actually does not exist. You can look on YouTube today and you'll find these videos of 11-year-old girls who are playing with Arduino, which is an open source hardware platform. And they're basically coming up with ideas for cute little toys, right? And then they basically solder hardware together to make it, right? Think about people who are essentially very familiar using Flash today, right? They'll come up with an idea, they'll design it, and they'll code it, right? So essentially it's the design technologist, someone who can bridge design, technology, and insight that really is the new role that emerges. And that really is a way that most businesses are not really organized to work. And I would say pretty much anyone who is over the age of 30, you haven't kind of seen how this world works. But anyone under that age, that's pretty much what the world is moving more and more towards. And so if you can find a way to bring that type of integrated design, development, and insight generation process into one person, into your organization, you have something that is very, very fast moving. Finally, the last point that I want to end with is this notion of reverse innovation. So one of the things that we're often asked at Frog is, it's great to be able to use an innovation process to be successful once, right? But how do you be successful over time, right? How do you be successful year after year after year and ensure that you can keep bringing innovations to market? Now, reverse innovation is a topic, or is a term that's, it's been around for a while, but the term was originally coined by GE, or became popularized by GE a few years ago, and they were talking about how ECG machines, electrocardiogram machines that they were making in rural India, targeting basically doctors who are in the remote villages, how they can make these devices that are small and more portable, and then use these as a way to help people in emerging markets or doctors in emerging markets. But what they found was hospitals in the US really like to use these too because they're smaller and they're more portable and they're cheaper, and so they're great. And so this was the reverse innovation concept first pushed by GE. We see many examples of this, but most companies tend to view reverse innovation as something that is, something that is incidental. It's a nice way to push your product line, to come up with some new products in your category. But is it really core to your business? Now, one of the things that we've seen in China that's quite interesting is that China's developing malls more than anywhere else in the world. So you've got companies that are building like 65 malls, luxury malls, in a 6-month period. Nowhere else do you have that type of development. And if you do that, you can start embedding these malls with all types of new emerging technology to test the boundaries of how much privacy people would be willing to give up for shopping perks, for tracking how they behave in the mall. So this is basically a large-scale behavioral experiment about retail and the trade-offs of privacy that you could not conduct anywhere else in the world, except in a place like China where you have that level of mall development. But China is not the only place that's special in that way. You go to Japan, and it's very interesting. The home project I was telling you about before, the home cleaning or home organizational product innovation program, homes are so small in Japan, right? Everyone is constrained for space. So it's a great way to think about, it's an archetype It's basically an example of a way to study space constraints and what that means on behaviors in the home. And anywhere in the world where people have small homes, which is true anywhere, Japan in some ways brings out the extreme, right? The extreme in space optimization behaviors. We just did a study in Afghanistan looking at mobile money, right? And one of the things that's fascinating in Afghanistan is it's a place to study trust in a way that is very different from anywhere else in the world, because people have absolutely zero confidence in formal institutions. People do not believe in government, they do not believe in banks, but they trust mobile operators, right? And so they're all of a sudden willing to give more belief put their money on the cloud and put their trust in a very different institution than what we're used to seeing, right? So it's a way to test an extreme edge case of a certain behavior. So this all seems interesting. It seems like it's outlier-oriented research. But when should you actually look for inspiration in these uncommon or different places? Now, my proposition to you is that for many Western companies, they find that year after year after year, they know their business so well, they know their consumers so well, and it's very hard for them to actually keep innovating year after year after year. They may have had a first success that was big, a second success that was also big, and now they can't get out of that trap of evolutionary innovation where they keep releasing the same things over and over or only keep making baby steps because you become more risk averse, right? So if you could actually look to these edge cases, to markets around the world as a source of insights, and actually use that as a way to essentially break yourself out of the trap of evolutionary innovation, then it becomes quite powerful. And if you could actually push that further and use this outlier inspiration as a way, as your most differentiating asset, even if you may be thinking about innovations in the US, you know that looking at China, looking at India, looking at Japan is actually a way to draw inspiration on a particularly local problem. And this is the conversation that we're now having with many of our global companies who are looking for ways to turn innovation into something that happens repeatedly. The reality is not all companies in the world are like Apple, where you have a visionary leader who is able to push a culture through an organization. Most companies have to work very, very hard to keep innovating year after year. So, in closing, I think this is what is actually most fascinating for me and why I've decided to come here. I'm very curious to understand what is Africa's posture of innovation. These examples that I gave you about what China has taught us at Frog really show us that a lot of the pace of innovation in China, the way we think about insights generation in China, actually represents in some ways a completely different framework or a completely different posture of innovation that is a counterpoint to the Western model. And I wonder if something similar also exists here. There are some extremely impressive examples of innovation that we all talk about in Africa, M-Pesa and others. But what does that represent beyond its impact to just a local market? How is that something that tells us something bigger about the practice of innovation, and why does that actually matter to the global innovation story? So very looking forward to exploring that further as I make my move here. And I'm sure many of you already, being locals here and having thought about innovation a lot, do have some answers to these questions. So looking forward to learning from you as well. Thank you.